Hello everyone, in this video I'll show you how I made these miniature quilts. I designed them on my computer and then I printed them onto this paperback cotton. I made them this way because I didn't want all the bulk of actually putting all the little pieces together. I'm using embroidery floss and I pulled away one strand, but you could use regular sewing thread as well. Here I'm showing you how I plan to sew my first line. It's not a fancy stitch, just a regular running stitch. I didn't want to run the thread up and down through the fabric. I wanted to work from the top. You could use a sewing machine, but I really like the look of the hand stitching for a quilt. Life-size quilts are made of 3 layers, the quilt top, the batting, and then the backing. But I didn't want all the bulk, so I'm just doing the top. And I figured once it's folded or placed on a bed, you wouldn't notice anyway. Especially with the hand stitching, it gives it that kind of puckery quilt texture, I think. This is a very simple quilt design. It's called a 9-patch. But there are other quilts that you could look at to get inspiration from too as well. I really wanted to do something like a double wedding ring, but I figured that was too complicated at first, so I'm just keeping it simple. I plan to run a line of stitches just like this across all of the 9 patches, all going in this direction and then going in the opposite direction. It will hopefully make more sense as I put more stitching on. That's just the way I chose to sew these quilts, but there are other stitch patterns that you could do as well. It's a quick little project to do maybe while you're watching TV. It goes pretty quick. One of the things I love about handmade quilts is when it's finished and maybe you've washed it that first time, is just how it gets all wrinkly on top. So don't worry if you're making it wrinkled or puckery with your stowing. I think it just adds to the look and fools your eye so you think it's a real quilted quilt. Here are those diagonal stitching lines that I was talking about. One going in this direction and then I have them going in the opposite direction. This is how I finished the edge of the quilt. I trimmed off just a little bit of each one of the corners and folded it over just till you start to see that corner on the top. I'm using this mini iron, but you could also use a full-size iron. I folded the edge over just till you saw the quilt top and pressed it. I didn't want any raw edges showing, so I tucked that under, and then that created my miter in the corner, and then I used a miniature clothespin to hold it. You could use a straight pin as well. I did this all the way around. And now I'm hand stitching the edge down all the way around the quilt. Just a simple stitch again like we did on the top. Later in the video I show you another method of finishing the edge where I just fold it over and I don't worry about tucking my raw edges under. I wanted to show a way to make a quilt top without access to a computer, so I drew up a pattern on graph paper with dark lines and put it into a sheet protector. Then, using a light colored fabric, I taped it down to the sheet protector over the pattern. That way you can still see the pattern. And then I used colored pencils and colored in the squares that had an X on them. My fingers are helping hold the fabric tight, and I colored in both directions to give a nice even dark color. Then I sprayed with hairspray to help set the color so it won't rub off when I'm hand stitching. I really like the way this one turned out compared to the computer printed one. I just did the stitching the same as I did on the other quilt tops. When I picked out my colored pencil colors, I tested them first on a piece of the fabric to see how dark they would be. Some of them just weren't as dark, and I imagine the brand has something to do with it as well. I used Crayola brand. I really like the feel of this quilt. I'm almost finished with the stitching on top. Here is that alternative way of finishing the edge. I didn't tuck the raw edges under, I just folded it over and stitched it. I hope this inspires you to make a quilt for your dollhouse. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.